Hi, in this lecture, I want to talk about managing security architecture gap using risk management processes. This is lecture 2 in my security architecture series. So why there exists a gap? Oftentimes the business requirements change and the architect was not notified about those changes and the controls were not adjusted accordingly. This results in a gap. When the architect performs threat modeling, he or she may have missed some scenarios, resulting in a gap. The controls suggested by the architect were not implemented by the technology teams, resulting in a gap. When the team performs misuse abuse testing, they may find some gaps. The last one is VA testing. VA testing is performed, might find some bugs. These are not directly related to the architecture effort, but the architect may still end up putting some compensating controls in those scenarios. So based on the gap, there is certain impact on the system. Sometimes the impact is so high, it becomes a showstopper. That means we have to fix the gap before we go live. Some examples of showstopper issues are possibilities of remote code execution, possibilities of horizontal escalation, either intentionally or because of a bug. There could be sometimes high impact things like audit failures or implementing a protocol which was a lower version than the one suggested by the architect, things like that. Sometimes it is a low priority example like a log message showing some sensitive data. It needs to be fixed in near future. So based upon the impact, the team has to make a decision if it wants to go live or not. If it wants to go live and the gap exists, it has to go live with a CAP or an RE. CAP is corrective action plan, RE is risk exception. In case the team decided not to go to production, it is either because of a showstopper or the business made a decision not to go live. In case of a showstopper, it is the security management team making the decision not to go live, and they need to issue a showstopper and notify the business about their decision, and the business has to make alternative arrangement. If it is not a showstopper, in all other cases the business should be made aware of the risk exist, and it is up to the business management to make a decision not to go to production. So the business has decided to go to production with a CAP, that is corrective action plan. In case of a CAP, there is a possibility we can fix the gap using a technical controls. That is the reason technology is the owner for the CAP. The technology team has to provide milestones and they need to provide information when they are going to fix, how they are going to fix, things like that. Most of the times the CAP should be less than a year. If it is more than a year, it is considered as a risk exception. Both business and technology teams have to sign off on the CAP because the business should be aware that there is a gap and there exists a risk because of the gap, and they're ready to live with the risk. And technology team has to sign off on the CAP because they have to provide milestones and things like that. If the CAP is not fixed within a year, it becomes a risk exception. If you are agile shop, one of the ways of managing the CAP is adding it to your backlog and manage it that way. Risk exception. So the business has made a decision to go live with a gap, and the gap cannot be fixed. Either it is because of a cost impact, or it is because there is no possibility of fixing it in the product, or the business doesn't want the control because it impacts the end user. All these cases, the business need to make a decision, and they need to sign off on the risk exception, and they need to own the risk exception. All the risk exceptions must be evaluated at the end of the year to see if the risk has changed, if it has increased, reduced, or we may need to put a control at that point of time. As an architect, you don't have to manage the caps or risk exceptions, but you need to be aware of those things, and also you need to make adjustment to some of the controls in future according to those decisions. Disclaimer: the presentation is not representing the company I work for. Please get in touch with me if you want to make suggestions, changes, or anything like that. In my next lecture, I'm going to talk about data classification. Thank you. Thanks for listening.